In this short video, we're going to consider some of the small actions that you and your colleagues can take that may help with the current situation. You see, for many of us, the coronavirus and the unknown risks that may be ahead are unsettling, to say the least. Our work or home arrangements may have been disrupted. We may have been asked to work from home or maybe in self-isolation. We're not pretending that a 7-minute video can make all of this okay. It can't. But there are some suggestions that may help reduce our stress and enable us to stay connected and support each other during these difficult times. These are only suggestions, but we hope that you'll find them helpful. If we're working from home, there's a risk that we become isolated from our colleagues. This feeling of isolation may be amplified if we have reduced the amount of time that we spend socialising and even shopping. We might find ourselves feeling quite alone. But we can take action to help reduce this feeling. If you've got a PC or a laptop, consider setting up an online coffee time. Agree with your colleagues when you're going to take a coffee or lunch break and set up a video call. Not to discuss work, but to talk about normal things that you would always talk about in the kitchen, tea point, or the water cooler. If you haven't got access to video conferencing, maybe just set up an audio conference or individual phone call with a colleague or a friend. Try to set these up at least 2 or 3 times a week. If you haven't heard from a colleague for a while, or if you know someone who is self-isolating, you may want to reach out to them specifically. See how they're doing. Just a conversation may make the world of difference to them, and you may be surprised about how much better you feel after speaking to them as well. There are lots of ways that we can use our IT to keep connected when we can't meet in person, but we also must remember that IT itself can be isolating. If we're working from home on endless emails and business calls, but don't have the release of talking or even grumbling with colleagues, we might feel disconnected, even though we've been communicating with people all day by email or even conference call. Those communications can be very stark and professional. Sometimes they will have been challenging conversations with people who are stressed because of their own concerns. All of these contacts may be necessary as part of our job, but normally we can talk to somebody else when we're upset or feeling isolated. Maybe just notice when we feel annoyed, upset or overwhelmed and pick up the phone, call a friend, have a chat and even complain a little. This way we can replicate some of our more personal interactions in our normal working lives. And if you start getting more phone calls from your friends, maybe try and take time for them. Instead of automatically thinking, and perhaps quite justifiably, about how busy you are, maybe just take 10 minutes to have the chat. You might find that you needed it just as much as your friend does. You see, with the 24-hour news coverage and most of the news currently being challenging, it's easy for our thoughts to run away with us. This is made more challenging because we've got an inbuilt negative bias which helps us to look out for threats or danger. For example, we might have the thought, well, what happens if I get ill? Then what if I have to take time off work? Will my colleagues understand? And will it affect my reputation? Suddenly, we can have the physical sensations that we might have if our reputation had actually been damaged. When we haven't even got ill, it might be a knot in our stomach or heightened breathing rate or a dry mouth. But the thing that we're worried about simply hasn't happened. Now, there's a way that we can bring our attention back to what is actually happening for us now, in this moment, rather than suffering from the anxiety associated with something that hasn't even happened. Research has shown that the way our brains are designed can help us here. There are 2 systems at work in our brains. The default system is working when we're thinking, planning and analysing. The direct experience system is working when we're sensing, feeling and even smelling. Both are hugely important, but if we're going over and over the same things or leaping to possibilities that haven't happened, then this can create stress. The great news is that the 2 parts of the brain can't both be working flat out at the same time. So by bringing our attention to our senses, we can actually break out of overthinking. We can reduce our stress, and we also know that reducing stress can improve our immune system. For some people, bringing our attention to our breathing can be helpful. We might want to take a few deep breaths, noticing the movement in our bodies, noticing the air entering and leaving our nostrils or mouth. And there are other things that we can choose to bring our attention to. Maybe taking just a few moments to notice the sounds inside or outside where we're working. Perhaps focusing on the view from a window, or perhaps a picture or poster that we have on the wall. Or we might like to bring our attention to our sense of touch. Maybe bringing our attention to the feeling of the floor beneath our feet as we walk between rooms or on our way to a meeting. This may sound a little bit strange, but all we're doing is interrupting that spiraling process that we're finding unhelpful. We're not suggesting that there aren't things that we want and need to plan. These are just some techniques that might help to calm our minds and our bodies. Similarly, many of us intersperse our day with ordinary tasks. For example, making a cup of tea or coffee or getting a glass of water. Instead of just doing these routine tasks automatically and not noticing them, maybe use this time that you're spending anyway to bring your attention to the sensations we experience as they happen. So if we find our thoughts spiraling, maybe get a glass of water or make a cup of tea or coffee, but really bringing our attention to the sensations. Notice the feel of the glass in our hands and the sound of the water flowing from the tap. The taste of the water, or focusing on the sound of the kettle as it boils and the colour of the water as it changes colour as we make the tea or coffee. Notice what happens as we add milk, and then the feeling of the warmth of the mug and the taste and temperature of the drink. So just to recap, in these challenging times, remember, connect with people socially over a video or a phone call. Look out for colleagues that you haven't heard from for a couple of days. Connect online or by phone with colleagues or a friend who may be self-isolating. If you're spending a lot of time with work emails and calls, connect with a friend to discuss what your day's been like. If you find your thoughts spiraling, maybe bring your attention to some physical senses like sounds, touch or taste. Try really noticing your senses as we do ordinary tasks to give the analytical part of our brains a break. As this epidemic unfolds, it's not going to be unusual for many people to be suffering from some form of stress or anxiety. If that's the case and you'd like to support them, do get in touch with us. There's a lot we can do to help.